Hello, folks. So I'm just looking, which desert did the Jews get lost in for 40 years? And what comes up is this. I mean, you can see, why did it take 40 years to reach the promised land? So, I have Google searched it, and the 12 spies come up. Let's have a look at the 12 spies. The 12 nice spies, as recorded in the book of Numbers, were a group of Israelite chieftains, one from each of the 12 tribes, who were dispatched by Moses. Now, back to this Google search in the New York Times. It says there's no trace of Moses in the Sinai desert. The other desert is Negev, and you couldn't get lost in there for 40 years. It's only a hop, skip and a jump from the Dead Sea to the Red Sea. So 12 spies. So they were dispatched by Moses to scout out the land of Canaan for 40 days. There they are there, with the camels, as a future home for the Israelite people during the time when the Israelites were in the wilderness following their exodus from ancient Egypt. This is when they were supposedly slaves. The account is found in Numbers 13:1-33 and is repeated in some differences in Deuteronomy 1:22-40. God had promised Abraham, who's supposed to be the first Jew, that there would be a promised land for the nations who come out of his son Isaac. The land of Canaan, which the spies were to explore, was the same promised land Moses asked for an assessment. So Moses wasn't a Jew either. Noah wasn't a Jew. Abraham wasn't a Jew. There's all these non-Jews that these Jews say that they follow. And they got lost for 40 years after being slaves in Egypt. Well, I'm not being funny, but it's already been proven that the pyramids were built willingly. So I don't know what they were slaving in Egypt doing, because there's no record of any pyramids in the Jewish texts. So, when 10 of the 12 spies showed little faith in the doom and gloom report they gave about the land, they were slandering what they believed God had promised them. They did not believe that God could help them, and the people as a whole were persuaded that it was not possible to take the land. As a result, the entire nation was made to wander in the desert for 40 years, until almost the entire generation of men had died, which obviously isn't the case. Joshua and Caleb were the two spies who brought back a good report and believed that God would help them succeed. They were the only men from their generation permitted to go into the promised land after the time of wandering. I mean, these are just hawkers, aren't they? The wandering Jew. Or this the return of the spies. So there's Numbers 13:27-28. They gave Moses this account: "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit, but the people who live there are very powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. So it's like, yeah, it's custy there. Let's get in there and have some of that. Easy pickings. Because I bet there wasn't an exodus out of Egypt. I bet you they were kicked out of Egypt. The word spies may be an incorrect translation. I can think of a few translations. The Hebrew word that the Torah, pronounced terror, uses is the meraglim, which means spy. The Hebrew word describing the group is also the word usually translated as men. So the Jewish men are all spies. Or the word usually translated as princes. Well, they certainly see themselves above everyone else. In addition, the 12 were clearly not trained as spies, nor did they conduct any covert activity, nor did they enlist any indigenous people for later help. Thus the phrase 12 scouts or 12 observers might be an alternative way to cover up the truth. However, the final point remains that their report resulted in a great outcry, and the Israelites despaired of entering the promised land and were punished by God accordingly. The Israelites' belief of the false report amounted to the acceptance of the Lashon Hara. Now that's a lot like, that's the evil tongue or slander. What was the other one? The Yetzer Hara against the land of Israel. The Yetzer Hara is their version of Satan, which they don't say is a bad thing. They say it's a good thing. And not that our version of Satan is a good thing. It's not comparable that way. It's comparable in that our version of Satan is a bad thing, and to them, their version of what we call Satan, to them, that's a good thing. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there were of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." So they've been outed, haven't they? This was considered a grave sin by God, so that's the Jewish God, corresponding to the 40 days that the spies toured the land. God decreed that the Israelites would wander in the wilderness for 40 years as a result of their unwillingness to take the land. Moreover, the entire generation of men who left Egypt during the Exodus would die in the desert, save for Joshua and Caleb, who did not slander the land. For 40 years the Israelites wandered the wilderness, eating quail and manna. They were led into the promised land by Joshua, the victory at Jericho. Oh right, so they did have a victory. Blimey, there was only 2 men left. The Battle of Jericho is an incident from the book of Joshua, being the first battle fought by the Israelites in the course of the conquest of Canaan. According to Joshua 6:127, the walls of Jericho fell after the Israelites marched around the city walls once a day for 6 days and 7 times on the whatever. So there was only Joshua and Caleb that survived, eh? And yet they just walked into this land of giants and took over. So that marked the beginning of the possession of the land. As victories were won, the tracts of land were assigned to each tribe. and they lived peacefully with each other, God brought victories where needed, and his promise to Abraham was fulfilled. So the Tish B'Av, according to rabbinic tradition, as seen in the Mishnah Tant, the sin of the spies produced the annual fast day of Tisha B'Av, when the Israelites accepted the false report. They wept over the false belief that God was setting them up for defeat. The night that the people cried in the 9th of Av, which became a day of weeping and misfortune for all time. Rashi, commenting on Numbers 13 to 25, notes that the journey was shortened by God, as God foresaw their downfall and subsequent proportionate punishment, one day equaling 1 year. Something not right about that story, is it? Hey, what's that? The Book of Lamentations. I mean, the proof is in the pudding with these people, isn't it? The proof is in the pudding. Well, that's it, folks. Just something to ponder.